have to give everybody a preamble. This is something I have been working on since before Strawberry Miku. Some of the stuff we're gonna look at today is from 2022. I have been continuously coming back to this project and trying to chip away at it. And most of y'all know the biggest reason that the chipping has been so slow is this cape. The last time I streamed this embroidery, which was in 2023, I was here where these two knots meet. And now I've basically made it to the other side. Got this much left of the knot and the entire tree. So it's like we're really close to victory on the knot and very far from done. If I did not make it clear, this is my Melania, the Blade of Mikola cosplay from Elden Ring. She is one of the hardest bosses in video game history. One day, Melania will get a big making video that encompasses everything from like her lore and why I decided to do the things I'm doing and the reasons I'm like doing everything about this in the least optimal way possible. It's a whole story I've been wanting to tell for many years, and I can't tell it until I finish the cosplay, which is gonna take a while. But the cape has made great progress this year. If you couldn't tell what's going on with the cape, I am hand embroidering that cape. So I say all that to say, be chill. Do not think that there will be Melania by like the end of the year. I think if I go really hard on this and I'm really diligent, maybe by the end of this year, I will have a Melania cosplay, but I don't know if that's gonna happen. However, this week in particular, I made huge progress because for the first time in many years, I worked on something other than the cape, and that being the pattern for the helmet. Promise concert Dawn versus embroidery, which is harder, embroidery. First thing I have to say, probably should have said this before I put this on my head. This is a mock-up. This is a pattern test. This is not even anywhere close to the kind of material that I'm going to do this in. This is not an EVA foam pattern. It is an EVA foam pattern, but it will not become an EVA foam helmet. It is a practice round. And that is why one of the knots looks different than the other and why one of them has like all this other stuff. This is all pattern testing. And I would say it's a pretty successful pattern test. Just this though, just this shape on my head, this is crazy to me. 4 years ago, I tried to do the helmet 4 years ago. I tried to do the helmet 2 years ago, and I just couldn't do it. I just could not figure out how these shapes worked or came together. There was a lot of things I figured out with the knot in 2022 that became integral to what I did this week, but I was nowhere near close to something that looked this close to her helmet. But how did I get here? What was the difference? Why couldn't I get this back then? And how did I get this week? Well, first up, we need to talk about that weird plaster head I showed y'all a little bit ago. It's time we talked about it because this is what it was for. So I've done big brain stuff, okay? This first thing, though, is not big brain at all. Because what we're about to talk about is how I got a plaster copy of my head, and I just need to warn everybody, the footage you're about to see is of a 31-year-old woman doing something really stupid and possibly dangerous. But when I got to the end of doing this, I felt like I should probably have done something different. It didn't feel safe. Do not do as I do. Do better than me. Be smarter than me. Be safer than me. Do not put plastic bags over your head without a hole in it. Let's be smart here, okay? Don't be putting a bag over your head if there's not a hole in the bag for you to breathe, okay? Suffocating is bad, okay? Okay. So, the plaster head started as a duct tape pattern of my head, which started with a bag over my head with a hole in it so that I could breathe. But yeah, I put a Kroger bag over my head and I started covering my head in duct tape. The thing that did not feel safe about this was that I really wanted to get my neck in there because I wanted this to be able to use this not only for this helmet, but also for wigs and stuff. And I really needed to know where the nape of my neck was, which you could totally do just by like continuing tape down your lower neck and not going around your neck. I don't recommend going around your neck because the thing that was difficult was trying to get it off of my neck. Just don't do that. I look like I belong in a horror movie when I have that on my head. Don't know if I recommend that you do this, but it did work pretty well. I just maybe don't do your neck. There's also other ways to do this. You could properly mold your head with mold making stuff. There is stuff you can buy that you can put on your head. That exists. I didn't want to buy it. There's always an inherent risk involved with casting your head in anything. Okay, anyway, because I didn't get any of the planes of my face, I had put like a little bit of masking tape over my nose so I could kind of use it to measure, and then fully just taped in all of the voids that were left by my actual face until I had this monstrosity of Kroger bag and duct tape, which is like an exact copy of my head though. This is where the plaster comes in though. I essentially then used this as a mold, as a cheap, dirty, imperfect mold. Like, if you're trying to do prosthetics for your face, this is not what you want to do, because I don't have any of the details of my face in this. This is truly just, I want to know the volume of my head and be able to sculpt things on top of it, which is why I did this next part in plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris. I don't know what it is. It's a powder that you mix with water and then it turns into a rock. My plan for it not getting deformed was by hanging it from this thing. This is like, it was the top of an organizer that you could hang clothes from. And so I just used more tape to suspend the thing in the air to keep the bottom from warping. The problem with that is then the neck warped. So I don't know. Ooh, Gabby knows. Plaster of Paris is limestone powder and a binder and probably something else. Okay. You don't want it on your skin. And I've gone overkill here because you don't need a full respirator for plaster of Paris. You need like an N95. You need a dust mask. You do not need a fume mask, which is what I'm wearing. A respirator will still protect you from dust, but you do not need a respirator for plaster of Paris because it doesn't have any fumes. It just is really dusty because it's a powder, and you don't want it in your lungs because when it mixes with water, it turns into a rock, and then you will have rock in your lung. You don't want that. It's also really cheap. That tub that I bought was like $20. Here's the other thing though, I gotta say this. If you were just looking for something you could use as a wig making pattern, skip the rocks. Get your duct tape head, fill it with expanding foam, you're good. The reason I wanted this in plaster is because I want to use, spoiler, monster clay on top of it. So I need something that I can heat gun near, and you can heat gun near rock. It gets hot too, that's the other thing. It gets hot and it can burn you. So you wanna wear gloves, you wanna wear goggles, and this is not usually how people use it. I did a slush cast in plaster of Paris. A slush cast is where you put in like a little bit of your resin. Normally people do this with resin. You put your stuff into the mold and then you slosh it around, and so it gets all over the sides, but not the middle. I did not just pour a bunch of plaster of Paris into the head, or else I would have had like a 50 to 100 pound head. It's still really heavy, but it is just, as you can see, around the edges and not in the middle. And the way I did that was by really just like a cupful of plaster of Paris at a time, getting it in there, smoothing it out with a plastic spoon to get it all over the edges. And then you can also see on the inside here. So this is not plaster of Paris. It is still plaster of Paris. It's plaster gauze. I was having a hard time getting the plaster to sit around this top edge and in the neck, and especially in the back of my head right here. So I got plaster gauze, which are pieces of fabric that have essentially been soaked in plaster powder to the point where all you do is mix them with water and stick them on stuff. Spoiler, some stuff went wrong with this, but this took a couple days of just like getting plaster where I could get the plaster to be, letting it dry, and then leaving a big enough void, and then sticking a PVC pipe in it and filling it with expanding foam so that it would be a little bit lighter, and making a giant mess in my garage. And then I got the duct tape off. And as you can see, this thing is a hot mess. What a mess. Who did this? This is what it looked like out of the duct tape. Full of cracks. You can still see pieces of bag everywhere. You can see where some of it is plaster gauze, some of it is plaster. It fully looks like the curator from E33. It looks like like I failed here. And it's about to look like I failed even more, because what happened was I didn't actually let the expanding foam fully expand before I took all the duct tape off. As I was trying to fill in some of those cracks and voids with more plaster of Paris, it started cracking further, like all over the place. Like the whole cranium was about to give up on me. And part of that was the expanding foam was pushing away the plaster. It didn't have anywhere to go. Me putting it on the stick like that was like pushing the top away from the sides. So to fix it, I covered the entire thing in more plaster gauze. And that solved all of my problems and made it look a lot better. But for $20 in plaster of Paris, which I did not use that whole tub of plaster of Paris, and maybe $15 in plaster gauze, I got a custom copy of my head. I did not have to buy like the expensive mold making stuff because I did not need like details of my face or anything. I didn't need it to be a perfect copy. I just needed it to be measurably close enough to the dimensions of my head that I could use it to make new wig bases on and make a helmet. Lethal Gecko has said it best. I now have a head full of foam and rocks. It's beautiful. We love her. The one thing I regret doing was when I did the duct tape pattern, I should have been really diligent about marking where my eyes were and my hairline and my nose and my mouth, because then in plaster head form, where I just have this kind of blob face, it was hard to figure out where my features were actually supposed to go. So now we get to the actual process of patterning the helmet. That was the plaster head. Now what did I do? I got my monster clay, and I started going at it on the plaster head. Monster clay, if you do not know, it doesn't dry. Like, it never dries out, which is pretty cool because it means you can always mess with it. But the thing about it is it has to be warm for you to like really be able to work with it. And we're not talking about like you can heat it up with your hands and warm it up. We are talking about you need to get like a rice cooker. Some people use slow cookers. Can't really see it in like the footage, but it says not for food across it. But you can also microwave it. We had this old rice cooker. You can't put it on heat because then it'll get too hot. But I can keep the rice cooker on warm and it will keep the monster clay at like a pretty good temperature for me. It won't liquefy it. It'll just keep it malleable. You can also use a heat gun. Got me my references, and through the power of my hands, Bachelor's of Fine Arts trained artistic eye, and the power of a little bit of basic algebra and math, I was able to form the simplest plane of the helmet. You may also notice this lacks like the bottomy parts too. We're not focused on anything other than the simplest plane of the object. That's the only thing I was focused on. When this is on a human head, what is the general structure of the shape on the head? Fuck the details, just this complex curve that goes around the head. That's all I did. But with that, I was able to do really big things just by figuring this out to scale based on my head measurement. It's rough. It doesn't have to look incredible. It doesn't have to be smooth. Right now, the bottom structure doesn't even have to be exactly where it's supposed to. It was just about trying to get it as symmetrical as possible, but even that wasn't a requirement. But then once I had that shape, I did another tape pattern. So plastic wrap, duct tape. Did you reference any patterns or did you want it 100% your work? I referenced no one else's pattern. Everything about this is 100% from what I did with my hands and thin digital air, which is the thing I am so excited and proud of. And the reason for that, just the general explanation of why I'm doing anything the way I'm doing it for Melania is that I love her and I want to rot for her. Y'all have seen a tape pattern before. I did a tape pattern. Why did I do a tape pattern? Well, once I had the tape pattern, this is where like the basic math comes in. So like, you look at the reference, you measure how big one thing is in comparison to the other thing, and then you like do basic algebra to figure out how big that thing is supposed to be on the now bigger thing. This is basic math and basic like artistic gauging of scale. This is me doing kind of, if you've ever seen people do this. Why does Rapunzel do this? If you don't know, what you do is you hold your thumb up to like what you're looking at. So if you were drawing me and you were trying to figure out how big my forehead is in comparison to the rest of my head, you take your thumb and you use your thumb to measure in the air the top of my forehead to the bottom of my eyebrows. And then with that, you go, okay, there's 1, 2, 3 foreheads worth of Sarah. She's a third forehead. That kind of thing. Basic math and doing that to get like the general shapes. Not going for the knot at all. Not attempting to draw the complex knot on this at all, because that would be futile. All I was doing was trying to figure out where this like flat part of the helmet meets with the main like grill of the helmet and the knot. I was wondering how algebra was gonna beat Melania. Okay, the other thing is this was wrong. I had this wrong. There's like an extra point right here that I did not get, but that didn't matter because Gabby says, I love your commitment to accuracy too. I am usually never the accuracy person. I am usually the no one will ever notice if this one little thing is inaccurate with your cosplay. The reason Melania has taken years is because I, like, on an emotional level, need her to be one-to-one. So, this is me with the tape on my head. All right, then all of that stuff went into Illustrator. If you've never seen me do any of this kind of stuff with Illustrator before, the basic explanation is I take the duct tape pattern, I cut it up to where it will sit flat on a table or as close to flat as possible. And I'll tape it down and then take a picture of it as level as possible on top of my gridded mat. Then I go into Illustrator and I use that gridded mat to put that photo in real scale. The gridded mat makes it really easy because you can isolate just literally one 1" by 1" grid of the mat, clipping mask it, make a 1" by 1" square with the square tool, scale it to 1 inch, release the clipping mask, and you have your duct tape pattern now at real scale in Adobe Illustrator, which is what those are. For anybody who hasn't seen the helmet yet, there's the helmet. These are my reference photos that I took and photoshopped out. So I'm not even using anyone else's reference photos. I'm truly soloing her. This one was wrong. You can't see it because I put another reference on top of it when I was working on the knot, but this one was wrong. It was missing like this extra little lip. So I did a bunch of stuff and then I had to delete it all and do it again. This is what I spent quite a while working in Illustrator on. I did the knot exclusively in Illustrator. I actually figured out and patterned the knot back in 2022, but because I could not figure out the shape of the helmet, I could make the knot and have the knot look correct, but then I could not figure out how to make the shape that the knot sat on. And so I actually had a version of this knot in Illustrator color-coded to know which one was which and how they interconnect. But I took the one I made in 2022 and had to clean it up and reshape it in Illustrator to fit what I now knew was the appropriate size and shape for what would fit my head and become the helmet, which essentially just involved, you know, like moving every single anchor point involved. That was me developing the grill. That is just a bunch of this little pointed shape. And I actually had to take those and bring them into Photoshop so that I could warp them as a unit into the shape I wanted and then retrace them in Illustrator to bring them back into vector quality. Yeah, so this is my mimicked here. This is primarily done by hand, but also by my digital hand, which is still pretty freaking by hand. Essentially, I used the image of the duct tape pattern to figure out the basic shape, and then once I knew the basic shape, I could take that and work that into paper patterns to figure out the shape of all of the details in the helmet. Ooh, I found it. Okay, this is the one I made in 2022. So this one here in the middle was the first knot I did. I essentially just traced an image in Illustrator of the side of Melania's head, actually just one of my reference photos from the side. It never worked right because it's a 3D object, and when it's 2D like that, it's not capturing the actual complex curve. So while I could figure out how the knot worked and how the shapes worked together and which ones go over top of each other, I figured that out in 2022. I couldn't actually figure out how big they needed to be in real life. And then I printed that out as a paper pattern, and it looked pretty freaking correct. And I was like, holy crap. So then I took everything I made in Illustrator and I prepped it for my laser cutter. Now this screen recording is not the final, and also both of the knots on here are not the final either. There's stuff I want to change about them. This is the file prep for the laser cutter. So some of those are that's like a run of me cleaning up the wings. Some of these are like embossed files. Some of these will become like the cut pieces of the files. A lot of this has to do with laser stuff, but of course with any pattern, you have to test things. And there was a lot of stuff with my laser cutting that wasn't quite right, as you can see. And so I had to do a lot of different tests to get it like on the right settings for what I was trying to do, and a lot of different messing with the pattern, noticing more little details that I had not seen before and adding them in and recutting and changing things and how the laser was going to cut them. Laser cutting is a lot of trial and error, but eventually I got this, which is my proof that my pattern works. But of course, why wouldn't it work? Because it was based off a shape in real life. So I took a 2D object, essentially. Melania's helmet on the screen is a 2D object. I took a 2D object and I made it in 3D, simplified. And then I put it back into 2 dimensions so that I could detail it, and then made those 2-dimensional objects into things that form this 3D object. And I feel like a goddess. I feel like I have done something that once felt impossible, which of course is the spirit of Melania. That is why I'm doing this so complicatedly. But I would like to reiterate, this will not be an EVA foam helmet. Well, Sarah, why would you make a pattern that works in EVA foam if you're not going to make an EVA foam helmet? Surplus won't get to know the road ahead, but y'all get to know the road ahead. This project is also so much about the journey of doing it and how that all relates to fighting a boss in a video game. Okay. That wasn't the inspirational speech. I have an inspirational speech. Are we ready for the inspirational speech? We live in a time of fast cosplay. Your favorite TikToker has a new character to show off every week. And that can make you feel like you're falling behind. But it is okay to take your time to not only become your favorite character, but to take as long as you need to craft it with all of your strange proclivities. 4 years ago, I grafted myself to a project that I lacked the space, tools, or skills to accomplish. But just like fighting the goddess of rot herself, it is rare that you succeed the first time. It is through failure, iteration, and persistence that leads away from defeat. One of the first pieces of cosplay advice that I ever got from the great Fawnina themselves through a Tumblr ask. Yeah, really. From a Tumblr ask. They told me, if you can't make a cosplay yet, do cosplays that will give you the skills to get there. And that's exactly what I did. From Pomni to Okarun to the canopy of my wedding day, they all led me to pattern what I could not before I declared the world as mine. It may only be a pattern now, but what I do with it may surprise you. For Surplus, this is where I leave you for now. Patrons get to know about all the plans for the road ahead, but you will have to wait until next time on Sarah's longest project ever continues to drag on. Just as still water turns foul, stagnation leads to decay. So please give me floodwaters of encouragement in the comments down below. I gotta get the engagement on Surplus. Did you just wing that? No, I wrote that down.